Hello, everybody. This is Laverne Macbeth from the Packlet Library, and today we are having our author talk with Cynthia Robinson. We are so glad to have her here with us today. And right now, I'm going to give the floor to Cynthia Robinson. So
Thank you.
good to have you.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful being here. Thank you for this opportunity. And so I was invited to talk a little bit about the book that I wrote called Surviving Motherhood, 50 Lessons from the Heart. And so I was just asked to talk a little bit about how it came into fruition. So I'm a big believer that challenges breed opportunity and opportunity breeds success. And as mothers, we've all had challenging moments. I guess I should say challenging days. And this was my experience in 2018, a few years ago, before I wrote the book Surviving Motherhood was birthed. And so at that time, I had 4 children, I believe 2-year-old, 9-year-old, 11-year-old, and 16-year-old. I think those were the ages at that time. And so life was as hectic as it sounds. And so I just had one of those days, and nothing seemed to be going right. I had a very chaotic morning. We'd overslept. The little one that refused to cooperate as I tried to throw his clothes on. We couldn't find socks. Now, moms, I know you've been there before. I think I'd thrown cereal bars at them, headed out the door. They were late to school. They'd argued the entire way to school. And I don't think after school was much better. And so after a long day of work, I remember picking up my then 11-year-old. She'd had a soccer game, and my oldest daughter had a concert at the exact same time. And so I just remember I was just really struggling. I was exhausted. And I really just felt like I was failing. When I got home that night, I laid in the bed, and I just remember thinking, where have I gone wrong? And I just felt like I was failing. I remember curling up with my pillow, and I'm not a very emotional person. I don't really cry a lot, but I just remember a tear just streaming down my face, and I just began to pray for strength and for wisdom. And I was just like, God, you gotta help me. And at that point, I just felt a sense of peace just came over me. And I laid there in my bed, and I remember this like it was yesterday. My then 2-year-old, who was still in the bed with us and still is at sometimes, but I remember him kicking me in my back. It was just like I got this sense of peace, and then all of a sudden I began getting attacked again. So I remember him kicking me in my back, and so I was really uncomfortable, and I couldn't sleep. And so I just suddenly felt this urge to write. And it was really dark, and I didn't want to turn the light on because I didn't want to awaken my husband, and God knows I didn't want to awaken my toddler. So I remember turning over and just pulling out my cell phone, and I just began to type. I had no clue that it was going to turn into a book. I just began to express my feelings that night. And if it's okay, I'm just going to read to you that first chapter, which turned into a first chapter. But this is what I wrote that night. Motherhood is not for the faint of heart. That's the title of the chapter. The unwelcome sound of my 5:30 alarm startles me. I fumble around tangled sheets and under jumbled pillows to find my phone, press snooze, and catch a few extra moments of much needed sleep. How in the world is it morning already? I feel as though I just closed my sleep deprived eyes. The rising sun peeks through my bedroom's twisted shades, reminding me that there's no rest for the weary. I lay quietly rehearsing the day's busy schedule in my mind, and I drag myself out of bed for what promises to be another eventful day. Indeed, I am reminded that motherhood is not for the faint at heart. Regardless of what stage of motherhood you are in, we can all emphatically agree that this is not a life for cowards. Our existence is a mixed bag of hugs and tears, highs and lows, doubts and certainties. It's demanding days filled with planning and improvising, mistakes and successes, hurts and forgiveness. And somehow, mothers still seem to manage it all. I admit there are days I feel I'm not cut out for this thing called motherhood. There have been nights that I've literally cried myself to sleep, wondering if I failed at what I consider to be one of the most important ministries ever to exist. Being a mother undoubtedly allows us to discover remarkable strengths from deep within. Those strengths cause us to love unconditionally and sacrifice everything to support the little humans we've been entrusted with. I often ask my mother why she never warned me about the challenges that so powerfully lend themselves to motherhood. She intentionally made it look so easy. Only now am I able to truly understand the many sacrifices she made for the sake of her family. There's no end to my gratitude. On numerous occasions, I've heard many say that motherhood is a thankless job. At times, it truly feels that way. There are no plaques, major awards, parades, or galas to celebrate mothers. There are no banquets, tributes, accolades, or shiny medals. But when I see the smiles on my children's faces or the gleam in their eyes, I'm reminded that it's going to be okay. Their simple gestures, occasional text, and tight hugs cause me to believe that I'm doing something right. When you are drained physically and emotionally, take a deep breath, say a prayer, and remember you were built for this. You are substantially stronger than you think and created to overcome any challenges that come your way. You are not insignificant, and neither is your position in life. You are a mother. And so that night, I really feel like I was writing that for myself. But at the same time, I believe that it has encouraged other mothers. And it was kind of funny as I even read it today, how it started out talking about some of the struggles. And then as the reader will find that it kind of turned into encouraging words. And I think at that point, I was encouraging myself. And then so every night after that, I really began to write. I began to write every night my kids would go to sleep. And that's how the book Surviving Motherhood was birthed. I believe it helped me to express my inner feelings about motherhood. But I was also excited about the opportunity to help other mothers who may be experiencing some of those same ups and downs of motherhood. And so it turned into being an inspiring collection, which is what I hope it is, of short stories. And there are 50 short stories in here. And I think they turn into short stories because that's kind of how my life is as a mother. I'm so busy that I really don't have time to write long ones. And I think, and I was just telling Laverne earlier today that my attention span as I've gotten older has gotten a little shorter. And so I thought this would be perfect for mothers who are always on the go, constantly busy, and they can just take, 5 minutes and read one of these chapters and hopefully be encouraged. So the book refers to, self-care tips and, raising compassionate children. And I'm just hoping that it will inspire and uplift women as they survive some of the crazy stages of motherhood.
All right. Thank you, Cynthia.
Sure.
So I have my copy.
Okay.
So before we start talking about it, tell us how we can have somebody else can get a copy of your book.
Okay, so the book is available at Hub City Books in Spartanburg. It's also available on my website at www.lessonsfromtheheart.net. And I have taken off the shipping for just especially for this event in case anyone wants to order a book.
Okay, good. Now, Cynthia, have you ever thought about maybe like a support group for mothers?
That on several occasions, and having such a busy life, it is very challenging to add something else into the mix. But I will say that I do spend a lot of time talking with mothers, and sometimes young mothers will just inbox me questions, and and I love that because I love being able to share the advice about motherhood. Now let me make sure that everyone knows this is I do not consider myself to be a perfect mother. And if you read the book, you will understand that. But motherhood is just something that I'm extremely passionate about because I realize that the choices that we make today, they're going to forever impact our children. And, the way that we raise our children is going to impact not only our home, but our schools, our community, our city, our state, and, ultimately the world in which we live. And so, any bits of wisdom that I have, I love to share that with women. And so maybe Laverne, I'll have to take you up on that offer and start a support group for women. But that's just something that I'm passionate about. When I'm talking to mothers, young mothers, or mothers to be, I don't feel like I'm working. It's just something that comes natural to me. I guess because I've just been immersed in motherhood for 18 years. So yeah, and we really lose ourselves. We forget who we are, and our lives. We become so wrapped up in our family, our children, that we forget that we have a passion too, that we have a ministry. I believe everyone has a ministry, that everyone has a calling, and sometimes I believe we get so caught up in the busyness of life that we forget who we are. And it's so important. I mean, whether you are, a young mother, middle-aged mom, or even an older one, and your children have moved out, it's so important to pursue what you love and just not forget that you're a person too. I have a really difficult time with that. My husband and I were talking about that last night. We were talking about some of our goals in life, and it is very challenging for me to write down what goals I want to accomplish outside of, family. So yes, do not forget who you are as an individual. Yes, your position as a mother is so important, but your position as an individual, as a person, is extremely important. And self-care, I mean, we've got to find time to take care of ourselves. I mentioned in the book that sometimes we're consistently pouring from an empty cup, and you can't do that. You have to take time for yourself where you become refilled, so that you can pour out and take care of your family. And you're no good to your family if you have not been, poured into.
That's good. That's so good. And another one that I thought was so, it reaches to this, it touches this season that we are in. You talk about help your child embrace diversity and show love.
Yes.
And to me, I thought that was such a good time to read that right now, when we are so caught up with so much division going on in our society right now. And you talk about the comfort zone that kids can get into,
Sure.
comfort zones.
I mean, I think that we all have comfort zones, regardless of, what your race is. I think that everyone has comfort zone. Whatever your circle is, you're more comfortable in that circle. I'm more comfortable around my husband and children than I am, a complete stranger. And so I think that we have to get outside of our comfort zones, in dealing with diversity, so that our children can be exposed to other races, other genders. It's just so important because I'm one that I sincerely believe that children are not born to hate. They are taught that. Children are born to love, and you see that if you go to a school, if you go to a playground. I mean, it doesn't matter what the race is. They love each other, and it only takes a few seconds. I don't know if you've ever been to a store or a doctor's office with your child, when they're really young, and they have the little play areas. This was pre-COVID, of course, and they had the little play areas, and one, my kid would be playing and another little kid would come up, look completely different. And it's like they become best friends instantly. But as adults, we're not like that. We stay in our own little circle, what we're comfortable with. And so I think it's very important. And I think it's okay to point that out to our children, especially once they get older. And just, as they're younger, I think we have a responsibility as parents to expose them to diversity. And so, and to teach love, from the very beginning. We are born to love, and taught to hate. And so I think as a parent, that's our responsibility to teach our children that. And like you said, you're absolutely right. There's so much hate and division in the world right now. And that's one of the things that I was hoping that my book would do, would actually bring mothers together, because even though we may look different, we come from different areas, or from around the world. One thing that we have in common is that we're mothers. And I think no matter what, we all experience some of those same ups and downs of motherhood. And so it's so important for us to find those commonalities with others and to grow that. And I would type in, and I hope no one's offended by this, but I would type in, Asian doll, African American doll, white Caucasian doll, because I wanted to buy an array of races, so that way that would seem normal to her. And I really think that that is a parent's responsibility. I cannot stress that enough for some of the adults that I see posting some of just the most horrible words that you can think of when I read, especially dealing with race and politics. I just feel like, no one can disagree anymore without it turning into hate or division. And I think it's okay to have different points of view, but the way the world is now, if you don't think like I do, there's something wrong with you and I hate you. And so it's so important for us just to show our children that we don't all think alike. We don't all look alike. We all grow up with different experiences, but we're all human and we all bleed the same color. And it's our responsibility to teach that love and that
about a passing of a family member, and you talk about how you wanted to protect your children from that emotional part of death. You want to talk a little bit on
Sure.
that?
Sure. Well, that was one of the most challenging experiences, I think, of motherhood, because it was really one of the first times that we had a family member passing away really right before our eyes, and my children were there. And so it's my Uncle Houston, who we all love very much. He's a professor at Sewanee, Tennessee. And we had gotten a call right before Christmas that he was really struggling with cancer. And so I remember my daughter at that time, we had planned a birthday party for her and for that Saturday, and we ended up having to leave home early because we wanted to go check on him. And so she, being the loving child that she is, she said, "Oh, Mom, it's okay. We can cancel the party." So we canceled her birthday party and we packed everything up to go check on my Uncle Houston. And he did not have very long to live by the time we got there. And I remember them sitting in the family waiting room, and my husband and I would go in and, see him. My husband would pray with him, and his sisters were there and they had been taking such awesome care of him. But I remember just being afraid to let my children come in and say goodbye, because my heart as a mom was already broken that, my uncle was passing away, but I was afraid to let them experience that same hurt. And so I just remember going back and forth with my husband. Should we allow them to come in, or should we just protect them? And with my whole heart, I just wanted to protect them and just leave them in the waiting room, because I didn't want them to experience that hurt. I wanted to protect them. But I learned that weekend is that, sometimes we are hurting our children when we protect them from, especially protect them from hurts that we know they're going to experience. We know that death is a natural part of life. And so even though as a mom, I wanted to protect them from that, I knew that that was something that I had to allow them to experience, and then just kind of help them walk through those emotions. Same thing a few weeks ago when my husband's grandfather passed away. One of the most awesome men that I know. And it hurt me that he had passed away, but it also hurt me because I knew that I was going to have to explain that to my children. And having 4 children, I had to explain it in 4 different ways. I had to explain it in a way that a 5-year-old could understand it, in a way that a 12-year-old, 14-year-old, and 18-year-old could understand that. But it was just really important that they knew that it happened, and they know that that's a part of life, and just talking them through that and helping them work through those emotions. So sometimes I think as moms, we do make the mistake of trying to shield them from the realities of life. And we do that simply out of love. But then in the end, I believe it may affect them. And so, yes, that was a very challenging time, but it also taught me some important lessons as well.
Okay. There is a lesson called Self-Love is a Great Love.
Yes.
And I really did like that because it really talked about the body image and what I don't want to say the world, but like how media kind of try to teach our kids about body image. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sometimes when our children are watching movies and they're, looking at books and magazines, they don't realize the type of photoshopping that takes place in those pictures. The skin is smooth, the stomach is flat, the clothes are perfect. And then they feel like they have to live up to those same expectations. And if they don't look like that, then something is wrong with them, and I felt like that growing up. And I realized that it was important for me to explain to my children, it's okay to be who you are. Yes, you can teach them about, healthy eating habits and exercise and things like that. But I never want them to feel like if they are not, 6 feet and 120 pounds, I'm not even sure what the right size is, according to the media, but I want them to know that they were created for a purpose and that they are beautiful. And also that, beauty is only skin deep. And so I wanted them to be beautiful, to also be beautiful on the inside. I want to focus on their beauty on the inside, but also let them know that they are beautiful and handsome on the outside as well. And, motherhood we have so many jobs as a mother, and and I hate to keep saying this is part of a mother's responsibility too, but it is, and this is not, I found sometimes it's just some of the things that I say, oh, does this make me look fat? Just little words like that. As children are growing up, they listen to that. And I think it's important to watch the words that we say because, our words, I was reading this morning just about how our words become our children's inner voice. And so, as we're saying these things, that's what they're hearing in their head as they're growing up and getting older. And I didn't want them to struggle with self-image. That's something that I have struggled with, growing up. And I think just the older that I've gotten, I've kind of come into myself and just realized that I am who I am. And, nothing can take away the fact that I am created a perfect being, because that's how God created me. And I want them to embrace that as well and not feel like they have to live up to someone else's standards to be beautiful or to be handsome.
At what point in the age during the transition that, between kid to preteen, did you notice a certain age that your children started noticing body image or becoming a little bit in that lesson you talked about how some of the outside like media and social media stuff started coming in and kind of whispering in their ear. So at what age did you start noticing that with your children?
I think for my oldest child, it was really around that middle school age. But I think because children have so much more access to social media and different devices, that really, I mean, we're looking at elementary school age now, because they have access to so much that we didn't have access to growing up. And so I think even, watching, Disney Channel and Nickelodeon, some of those popular kid shows, if you look at most of the superheroes, or the most popular shows, they look a certain way. And I think even subconsciously, I think that our children feel like they have to look that way in order to fit a certain role and to feel beautiful. And so even telling your children, when they're younger, you are beautiful, come here with your pretty self, just little words like that. And I think especially now men, I mean, sometimes we don't think that boys deal with that, but they do. And so I think it's important for whether they're male or female. I mean, I'll say for the females, I think it's especially important is that they hear it not just from their mother, but from, either their dad or a positive male role model. Because I think that sometimes children who do not hear that, they search for love in all the wrong places because they don't feel beautiful. And so I think it's very important to make your children feel like they are beautiful, they are handsome just the way they are, and they don't have to go to extremities to fit into the world's mold of what's considered beautiful, or even what's considered smart. I work in education now, and growing up, I felt like that college really was the only choice. Like, everyone needs to go to college, and I'm just learning. I really feel now that if a child wants to pursue another path in life, I don't want children to feel like they have to fit into this box in order to be successful. And I think that even as parents, we have to get outside of that box in order to let them thrive and become who they were created to be.
Okay. All right. Now I'm going to ask some questions about your writing process.
Okay.
Now, in your book, you wrote 50 lessons. As your children become older, are you going to do a second edition of the lessons? Are you in the works of processing another book?
The funny thing is, so when I wrote this book, Surviving Motherhood, so then everyone in my family said they wanted to write a book. So that my 12-year-old said, well, I'm going to write a book about surviving middle school. And my husband says, well, I'm going to write a book about surviving being a pastor. It's just kind of funny that everyone in my family had something they could write about. I am not finished writing. I don't know if it's going to be a second edition or not, but writing is something that I have enjoyed since I was very young. And I think it's just a way for me to express my feelings. And sometimes I just begin to write, as in this book, I just begin to write and it turned into a book. That was not my intention when I first started. I wrote a book several years ago. It was a book of poetry because I do love poetry. That's one of my favorite genres. I wrote a book of poetry. So I don't know what the next one's going to be. Well, I think for aspiring writers, I would say I think it's important for you to see the world beyond yourself. When I'm writing, I always try to imagine how the reader will feel and how it will, impact the person who's reading the book. When I used to write, I was afraid to get the opinion of others because of my insecurities and my fear of negative responses. But hearing the perspective of others, I think, is invaluable. And it helps you see the world beyond yourself as a growing writer. And so this particular book I did send to several people because I wanted to get that feedback. And so I think that's one of the traps, is that authors get so excited about publishing a book that they don't take the time to actually get other people to read over it and to look outside, again, out of their little world and think of how the reader may feel when they're reading that book. Um, Another common trap, I would say, for writers or aspiring writers is really just not writing. Um, I think the project and goal sometimes seem so overwhelming that we just, don't have the determination and the fortitude to even begin to write. And so I think the most difficult part of writing a book is starting the process. And so I think that's a common trap, is that you just feel like the goal and the project is so large, you just don't even know where to begin. And so if anyone watching this is an aspiring writer, I would just like to encourage you, if you have a calling on your life to write, just write, set small goals and work hard at it. Because with every single word that you write, you're one step closer to your goals and your dreams. One other common one is not reading. So like, I'm not a big fiction reader, but I'm a big nonfiction reader. I enjoy learning. Like I said, I enjoy poetry, reading books from Maya Angelou, Langston Hughes, Robert Frost, even old Edgar Allan Poe. But I think if you're going to write a book, if you're going to be a good writer, you should also spend time reading. That if you're not a reader, it makes it very challenging to be a writer. And those are just some that I thought about.
Okay. So if you could tell your younger self, the younger writer, what advice would you give her, that younger Cynthia?
That younger Cynthia, I would tell myself to be passionate, to passionately pursue what you love. And in some ways, I have passionately pursued what I love, but one day I would love to completely just step out on faith and immerse myself in freelance writing and marketing. When I was younger, I think I wrote out of love and passion. But there also has to be a certain amount of intensity and fire that pushes you to launch out into the deep in order to reach larger audiences and broaden your scope. Sometimes passion just isn't enough to cause you to become successful. So you have to have passion backed by goals, and that fortitude. So I would tell my younger self to step out on faith and do what you love to do. I would also tell myself to find the time to write and stop making excuses. Get up an hour early, get off of social media, stop watching television for a while. Anything that you sincerely want to do, you're going to find the time to do it and stop making excuses. I think sometimes we make excuses out of fear. That's our mechanism that keeps us from reaching our dreams and our goals. We operate in fear. And so we use the excuse that we're busy. When I was writing Surviving Motherhood, I was barely surviving myself. I mean, I had to disconnect from so many other things, and I had to pull an all-nighter. I remember taking the children to the pool and just letting them play and just writing for hours at a time. And I really believe that I would have many more books by now had I just told myself, if I had just known there is time, you just got to find it. Sometimes we get so busy and like I said, we use it as an excuse, but busyness does not always equate success. I think sometimes busyness is a cover up because we're afraid to step out and do what we know that we've been called to do. So that's what I would tell myself.
Good advice. Let me see. How long did it take you to complete this book?
Well, now I'll tell you, I've been asked that question several times, and in fact, that was another thing that I would like to say real quick. A common trap is that we rush the process. Actually, I did already mention that. So with this book, I've been asked that question, and I always say that it took me 18 years. It took me 18 years to write this book because my experiences um, that's what pushed me and launched me into this writing project. I could not have done this project without the experiences that I've had over the 18 years.
Okay.
Or I'll tell you a funny story. I hope my son's teacher isn't watching this one. But he's in the 8th grade now. So this was when he was in the 7th grade. So ever since he was in elementary school, I've always helped him with his science projects. Okay. So he's always done well, but like he's never made it to the regional competition or whatever that is, the next step up from the school. And so I remember telling my husband, I said, you know what? I said, you need to help him this time because I apparently I'm just not doing a good enough job. And so I said this was a funny story, but it really is. It's kind of sad. But so this 7th grade year, my husband said, okay, I'm going to help him. So he helped him with this project. It was awesome. It was something dealing with basketball. I mean, it was very creative. And he won like the division in the school spelling in the school science fair. And they had sent the paper home for like the regional science fair. And they said, because he was in the top 3, that we could take his science for a project to, I think it was USC Upstate or something like that, in order to compete regionally. And so I was so excited. I did kind of feel bad because he won the first time that I didn't help him. But I was so excited for him. And I said, oh, baby, you did it. This is awesome. And so, a few weeks go by and I'm like cleaning out his book bag. And I had, and I looked at the paper and we had missed the regional science fair. So I put it in my calendar, but I put it in my calendar somehow like a year in advance. And I was so upset that I was so mad at myself and he was upset. And actually he started having, compassion for me because he could tell I was so mad. But, that's just an example of just how, we're always juggling. We're constantly doing something. There's not a time if mothers are not up doing something, our minds are working. And so, I felt horrible. And that was an example of a time that I had to just press the reset button. There was nothing I could do about it. I'd missed it. My son had missed that opportunity. And so I just had to press the reset button. And every mother in the world has had to do that. It may not be the science fair, but it's, forgetting lunch. I mean, I remember one time I drove my child to daycare and had forgotten his shoes. Yes, I left his shoes at home because normally I'll pick him up and, put him in the car seat. This is when he was younger. And I'll grab the shoes on the way out the door and I'll put them on when I get there. But that particular day I hadn't forgotten his shoes. So every mother could tell you something crazy where we've messed up. And sometimes you just have to accept the fact that you are not the perfect mother. You're not going to be the perfect mother. And there are no perfect mothers anywhere. And so you just have to press the reset button and just say, you know what, we're going to have a clean slate tomorrow. Everything's going to be okay. I didn't, I missed the mark today, but tomorrow's a new day, and keep it moving.
Exactly.
So Surviving Motherhood, 50 Lessons from the Heart. And the website is lessonsfromtheheart.net.
Oh, that's a nice background.
That's what I originally created because I wasn't sure what my house was going to look like. So I said, let me just create this virtual background just in case. But there you go, lessonsfromtheheart.net.
Oh, good. Yeah. And like I said, this book really was touching. I laughed. I teared up. I'm like, oh,
Thank you so much.
It was such a good book. And I recommend it to any mother at any stage. And
I realized that it was more than just a way for me to express myself. I really wanted to be transparent, and the reason I wanted to be transparent is I wanted it to be more than just a book, but I wanted it to minister to mothers everywhere, and for them to know that they're not alone in this fight. That you're going to have bad days. I mean, who wants to write a book about all the mistakes they've made? But I just thought it was important to do that because I wanted other mothers to realize that they are not alone in their feelings and in the way that they make mistakes. Sometimes we all do. And so I also wrote about, the miscarriages that I had, and that's kind of like a taboo topic that some women are afraid to talk about. And I thought that was important to touch on that because 1 in 4 women have actually had a miscarriage. And so, because that's something that a lot of women do not talk about, when I first had my first miscarriage, I did not realize what kind of emotions that I would actually have and how emotional and hurtful that was. Not only the miscarriage itself, but how people responded to me after I had the miscarriage. And so I decided to write about that, and not because I wanted to just tell all my business, but because I wanted to help other mothers who may be going through a tough time and may feel like, am I the only one that feels this way? And so surviving motherhood is just, motherhood is wonderful. I would not trade my 4 children for the world. I love it. They make me better. They make me stronger. They give me hope. But it's tough. But motherhood is tough, especially when you have 4 children who are in 4 different stages of life. And so, I wanted to write this book that, not only did it help me express my own inner feelings and emotions, but I wanted it to encourage other mothers along their motherhood journey. And it will make a good Mother's Day present. Yes.